Hello everybody and welcome back to Hypixel Skyblock, where in today's video we are going to be looking at the best Berserk setups for Hypixel Skyblock. So if you enjoy playing the Berserker class of Hypixel Skyblock, you'll know that it's an incredibly popular class for the early game. Like, if we go into this dungeon hub, I guarantee you there's a decent amount of people in this hub that play Berserker class. You see a lot of people wearing stuff like Shadow Assassin armor, and that is one of the most popular armor sets for Berserker. And, you know, people just love the class because it's great for early game players to get a hold of dungeons and really start progressing through the game. So this is going to be a complete progression guide for those players that want to start playing dungeons and want to start with the Berserker class. It will have everything you need to know for starting to play as a Berserker and the early game Berserker through the end game Berserker items that you will need. So let's start off with the earliest of the early game, the entrance floor. So for this, you're going to want an armor set called Super Heavy Armor. Entrance as a floor is relatively easy and doesn't require much, but the Super Heavy Armor is pretty good for what it costs. If we look at the Super Heavy Armor set, you can get the Super Heavy Armor set for free or on the auction house. So you can get it as a drop because, I mean, it's just a common drop that you can get in dungeons, or by sorting by lowest price. And as you can see, it's really not that expensive. 10,000 coins for a chest plate, 17,000 coins for a boot, 65,000 coins for a helmet. How many coins for a pants? 33,000 coins for a pants. No, it is actually a decent set. But I highly recommend you just get it for free because you can get it relatively quickly by just playing dungeons, and a lot of people just actually salvage it, so that's part of why the prices on the auction house are a little bit higher than they need to be. But I highly recommend you try it out because it's a great armor set for this because it has really high defense. If you saw back when I was here, the defense that this item gives you is really, really high. It gives you 81 health, but the real thing you want is the 234 defense, because that will help you survive more, and as an earlier game Dungeons player, you will need that survivability, because basically everything will be killing you. You will also want to use whichever pet you have, and for the weapon, for those early game dungeon players, I highly recommend you get either a Raider Axe or an Aspect of the End. These items honestly do not cost that many coins. Raider Axe is 150k off of Buy It Now, so relatively affordable, and I think the Aspect of the End is a little bit higher. Both of them are very affordable. Aspect of the End is actually a huge utility item, so these are definitely investments that you're going to be making into the future of your gameplay. If you really just want to start playing dungeons, you can use whichever weapon you have to start, whether it's like a Silver Fang or something, but probably you should try to upgrade to one of these items before trying to get too far into it. As for the pet, I highly recommend you just use a Griffin pet. At this stage in the game, you don't need anything too fancy, and a lower tier Griffin pet should totally get the job done. It gives you decent stats and is relatively cheap. So I highly recommend you try out a Griffin pet as something that can work in that scenario, because, I mean, why not? It's pretty good and very, very useful. Moving on to the mid-game, the early mid-game for floors 1 and 2. You're going to want to use the Aspect of the Dragon's weapon. Now, this is actually a pretty good weapon that I have a surprisingly good performing video on. The Aspect of the Dragons is really cheap at 500,000 coins as far as weapons go, and its right-click ability is really cool, knocks a bunch of things out of your way, and if you compare the damage and strength of my Aspect of the End to the Aspect of the Dragons, there is actually a massive step up in damage, with it going up over 100%, which is very, very useful for dealing a lot more damage. It's also a legendary item, which gives it better reforge stats, so you can be sure that it's going to be dealing a lot more damage and really helping you out. Paired with its awesome ability, it makes a really solid weapon for the early mid-game. But if you don't have the budget, you can still stick with something like a Raider's Axe. You will also want to look into upgrading that Super Heavy Armor, maybe switching it to Zombie Soldier Armor, if you have the survivability to spare, because that will get you a little bit more damage. So you will want to actually also start reforging this gear, because that will help you out a lot. As far as pets go for this part of the game, you can definitely look into things like lion and tiger pets at lower levels that you can slowly upgrade into higher levels, because these will give you a decent bit of a stat boost that can carry on to future pets for mid-game, especially if you start leveling them up now. And they're not that expensive, and the stats can be really good at getting you some more damage, so I highly recommend you look into it. Let's move on to the actual mid-game with floors 3 and 4. For this, you're going to want to start looking into the Flower of Truth. It is a bit more expensive than the things on this list, but not that much, actually. Its prices have been going way down as way more people are playing Floor 6, particularly M6. It costs 3.6 million coins. I remember when these were like 15, 20 mil. It was crazy. Now, they are super cheap, and I highly recommend you pick one of these up because they can deal a ton of damage when used correctly, and are surprisingly affordable for the mid-game, as I said before. Now, your armor spend is increasing a lot this time, all the way to 3/4 Shadow Assassin. You will need to get a floor 5 carry or get a completion yourself to use this, but it's relatively cheap and really, really good as an armor set. That's why it's really popular. You will get made fun of a lot for using it, unfortunately, but it is actually a very good armor set. Now, why 3/4? Well, that's because the Shadow Assassin chestplate is really expensive due to its higher rarity. As you can see, they're going for like 22 million coins right now, which is a lot, and that's very expensive. So I highly recommend you switch it out for something like a Zombie Knight or Zombie Soldier chestplate that will give you a bunch more damage and still be a pretty good chestplate. Obviously not as good as real Shadow Assassin, but, you know, in a pinch, it works because you probably don't have the coins for it at this point. For your pet, I would recommend sticking with that lion and tiger pet that I recommended for the early mid-game, hopefully at a higher level at this point, and maybe you even went to cat and upgraded it. Who knows, but it should still be a really good pet. So for late mid-game, which is floors 5 to 6, you're going to want to keep that Flower of Truth that you got for super cheap in the last segment. But you will want to look into a Livid Dagger as well for another high damage weapon. This one can be slightly better and will deal a lot of damage as well. So I highly recommend you look into the Livid Dagger just as much as the Flower of Truth. For armor, you're going to want to look at full Shadow Assassin this time, with a perfect chestplate if you have the coins, a full Shadow Assassin chestplate. So that's obviously a bit more expensive, but they're both really excellent. You're also going to want to apply Livid Fragments to all of your armor, which does cost a bit, but should improve them a bit. Your pet at this stage in the game is not even a question, it's basically only the Baby Yeti in terms of what would make a good pet. Baby Yetis are not that expensive as far as super awesome pets go, but they're insane. At 16.2 mil, they're definitely on the higher end of pets, but as far as pets that you're going to be able to use for the rest of your Hypixel Skyblock career, they are not that expensive. So I highly recommend you get a Baby Yeti pet, even if it's a lower level for now. They give you tons and tons of extra defense, which makes it really good for basically just having around, because especially if you're holding something like the Flower of Truth, you will be getting absolute tons of defense helping you survive for longer. Let's move on to the end game at floor 7. For this, you're going to want the armor Necron armor with the diamond head of the floor you're playing, or the golden head, depending on just how insane your budget is, because the diamond head will cost a lot more than the golden head, so probably the golden head, to be honest. For your weapon, you're finally going to be upgrading to a Necron blade. This time, probably a Valkyrie, but that is really up to you. You're going to want to look at what you need more of, damage, survivability, and make a choice off of that. So the Valkyrie is the normal choice for Berserkers, but it is truly up to you. For your pet, Baby Yeti is still insane, and if you need more damage in floor 7, you can look at the legendary Wither Skeleton. Obviously, the Wither Skeleton is getting sort of expensive as well as the Baby Yeti, but at this point, you should have the budget to spend on a fancy pet. So it just depends. You can change them out in between stages, whether you need more defense or whether you need more damage to those withers from the legendary Wither Skeleton. Now, what about Master Mode? Master Mode with Berserker is a bit of a tricky subject, and you'll notice that I haven't been covering it in this video. If you guys really want me to do a Master Mode Berserker guide, please let me know, but honestly, for Master Mode, I would highly recommend you switch to the Archer class, because Master Mode is kind of tricky to play as a Berserker, and you won't want to be in that many higher level parties. So I highly recommend from Berserker class, you switch over to the Archer class. A lot of your gear, like the Necron armor, will still work, but you'll get a lot better in terms of getting higher level parties and everything like that if you decide to switch to an archer and go for something like a Juju shortbow, or if you have the budget, a Terminator. So, by the way, check out my archer guide for that, just a quick and subtle blog, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because it really helps me out. And thank you all so much for watching this quick and simple Berserker guide for Hypixel Skyblock. If you did enjoy, leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.